Brown Chicks Changing the Face of Therapy on both sides of the couch.
Today we have Rene Garcia.
Hey.
Welcome. He had us on his podcast a few months ago, and so we wanted to return the favor.
Yes.
He also recently wrote a blog for Melanin and Mental Health, so if you head over there, it's called Dear Racist Client.
That's right.
Boom.
And so it talks about his experience with his first racist client.
Yeah.
Have you had any since? Have you?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, yeah, this is going to be great.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
This will be a good discussion.
So today we're talking about racism within the therapy room,
Right.
whether that's with clients, it could be with the therapist, it could be with your supervisor, whoever. So we're going to chat about those different topics. Do we have anything going on, Melanin Mental Health?
So next
April?
we just wrapped up the
We just
last
had our
night.
event, yeah.
Woo, and shout out to therapist of Katie, Stephanie
Yes.
Falcon-Banasaw. She,
So good.
man, that was such a good discussion.
I
She
was
was
taking notes.
teaching us, I learned from her, and I specialize in relationships and sex, and she gave us a lot of resources and tools on helping couples to connect body, mind, spirit, to take their sex lives to the next level.
Mhm.
So that was great.
It was really good.
Next month we are headed to
Austin.
Austin. We are coming to Austin. Yeah, we're going to do our first happy hour there.
We are. So if you're in the Austin area, let us know. Let us know where we should be going. Well, we already have like a list. I forgot. Somebody gave us like a full
Mhm.
list. So
Rainy Street.
Minority owned.
Minority owned.
Oh,
restaurant.
okay.
Yeah. That's what we're going after the happy hour. So that's our next stop is Austin. So look for us out there. And then our next Houston event will be in May.
Yes.
Woo. Yeah, we're trying to, it's always something. We're trying to spread it out a little bit more so we get some breathing room because it's a lot.
I have to plug y'all's Dallas event because if you haven't been, I went to the Dallas Networker and I got really good connections there.
Oh,
and
that's
so
awesome.
I have to give y'all props for that.
Yay.
That event was awesome. I got some really good connections, and so if anybody's thinking about going, I highly encourage you to because it was helpful for me.
Yay.
Right. That's
we appreciate
awesome.
That.
Yeah, for
we
sure.
Appreciate it.
Just trying to connect.
They didn't
with
pay me for that
people.
plug.
Oh, yeah.
I'm genuinely excited about it.
You still feeling some type of way for us not going with
Oh, yeah.
afterwards.
Because we didn't go out after the happy hour.
That's a between sessions after hours conversation. I don't do that.
Between sessions,
That's the B side. That's the B side.
The B-side of
conversation.
between sessions.
The
Yes.
mixtape.
But yeah, Dallas was fun though, and we appreciate it. It was rainy and the weather was not that great,
Yeah.
but it was a nice turnout.
Some lemonade out
and
of some lemons. So
yeah, and it
Yeah,
was
it
good
was
connections
nice.
being made, and it was such a diverse crowd, like just different types of specialties, and everybody kind of doing their own thing. And
Yes.
I love therapist entrepreneurs, of course, and then I met a couple of those people, and that
Yeah,
was
for
cool.
sure.
So yeah, it's great.
Lots of great stuff downside's going on.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
All right, so do we have anything else? I want to get into the topic.
No, I think that's it right now.
Okay.
I mean, we're still doing the directory.
Oh,
We'll talk about that at the
Yeah,
end.
we'll talk about that at the end. But of course, sign up for the directory, get a shirt, new mindset, who this. I wore this very specifically, which I'll tell you about afterwards.
All right.
So, okay, so we are talking about racism as it shows up in the therapy office. And so the first question is, what do you do when a client of another race makes a racist comment about your race, if that makes sense? So,
Right.
yeah.
Right. I think, as it was explained to me in grad school, is that you have to, at your best, remember that this is not your therapy session.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's really the hardest thing to do, especially if, like in the blog, and we'll talk about it later, is, I think for me, because I'm a light-skinned Latino,
Right.
I can, I'm taller. I'm not what you would specifically.
You pass.
I can pass, right? We'll get to that later. But as far as being what you would think a stereotypical Mexican may be, short, brown skin, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think you have to remember that number one, it's not your session,
Right.
but at the same time, that doesn't mean you can't be transparent with your own personal feelings.
Right. Right.
You know what? I heard you say this, and when I hear something like that, to me, it's an offensive topic. Like, where have you heard that, or how does this play into it? Because ultimately, they're bringing it up for a reason.
Right.
Sure.
Right.
Something happened in their life that term or this statement or this name was a common use or is used to it plays some purpose in the conversation you're having
Right.
at that moment.
Right.
So I think you have to kind of remember as much as you can to, you can wear your social justice warrior hat at any time.
Maybe not, yeah.
Yeah, and but you can do it in a transparent way that is not just you being aggressive or assertive, and so that's
Right.
has to do a lot of your personal work, I think.
That's true.
Oh, a lot of personal.
And I definitely think it's a good point of like attempting to keep it about them and not about you.
Yeah.
And that can be difficult when you are triggered, when somebody says something that makes you like, whoa, like, what's happening?
Right, but that doesn't mean the trust can't be built.
Right.
That maybe they had not been in any contact with a person like you
Right.
that is willing to have that conversation,
Right.
and they can be open about it.
Right.
Well, and I think what you said also, they may not, when you pass, you can easily pass for a different race. They may not even know that you are, and so this is a new experience. So maybe what their, prior beliefs were, and they're like, oh wow, maybe by you bringing it up, that's an opportunity for them to see something different.
Mm-hmm.
But I love what you're saying. How does this relate back to whatever it is they're coming to therapy for?
Right, for sure. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much the only time I've encountered like directly racist, like basically using the N-word, in session was with my teenagers when I used to work with teenagers, which I don't do anymore.
Right.
But when I worked at the group home and I worked with teenagers, and of course it was that whole like, well, my friends, let me, or they don't get upset. And so I would just use it as a moment to like just educate.
Mm-hmm.
And then we would kind of move on from it. Like I didn't dwell on it. I didn't like, let's talk about, your feelings about it. Because a lot of times it was just like my friends use it. They allow me to use it. And so then
Right.
I think it's okay.
Right.
And so I might do like a quick education around it and why it can be offensive or why it can cause problems. And then I just kind of like let that go. And then if they bring it up again or ask more questions, then we could talk about it. But again, I don't want it to be about me, but I also want you to be aware that it's not okay, and I let my team say a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Right? But that's just it. This is how it affects me and this is why it's not okay.
Right, for sure. And the thing is, especially with like, when I think of like minority communities, I think of when I think of low income minority communities, I don't think of just specifically Black, because there's
Right.
a lot of Latino. They're growing up in the same neighborhoods. You know what I'm saying? There's also minority whites out there too, that are in these same communities. And so I do think there's a tough line to walk on and balance to say, okay, what is normal vernacular to them versus are they using this in an offensive way? And then that brings up your point saying, okay, but this is a boundary for me.
Right.
Yeah, and you're allowed to set boundaries as a therapist, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, you're definitely allowed to sit here and say, this is not okay. Like, I'm not okay using, the F word describing gay men or gay women. Like that to me is super offensive. But that doesn't mean you can't describe them in another. Okay, give me another word. That's what I tell my teenagers.
Right.
Okay, let's change up a word. Give me another word because that word's not okay here. You know? And then they change it up. All it is just a word, and they're able to kind of go back into it. But I do think you're definitely allowed to set boundaries as a therapist.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a good point to that is, especially when you are early on a therapist, when you are doing internship or you're doing your practicum and these issues come up that can really catch you off guard. That's why the importance of supervision and having colleagues that you can get support with and process some of this, so that you and even in the programs that we're in, having this conversation like this may happen to you. How are you going to handle it?
Right.
Yeah. So what about when someone that's the same race as you makes a comment that's racist?
Again, I think,
or homophobic. I think you just made a good point of that.
Right. I think it's very similar to that, and you have to be able to, again, remember it's not about you, but let's talk about this transparency. In Mexican culture we have the term India. It's the pinche India, which is a very derogatory term saying that they are indigenous, trashy, like, if you're India, that means you're dark skinned, you're short, you're a lower class kind of thing. So you hear that term often. I'm not going to lie, I've used it in my history before too, as a way that is, not meant specifically for that, but again, it's a derogatory term, just as it's you use in the vernacular. And so, again, I think you have to be willing to, with your therapist hat, be willing to have that conversation, be open to it, and not shy away from it. A lot of the background training that Stephanie, if you're listening, Stephanie, I know you got it too. With collaborative language systems, we talk about that stuff is collaborative language system gold. I mean, you look for stuff like that. Hey, let's pause this for a second. You use that term and then you kind of shift your body, like almost like it meant something to you. Can we talk about that for a second? Because it sounded like that term meant something to you, and I would like to talk about that. And we can go back to what we were talking about, but it seemed like your whole body changed when you said that word, and that's when you can just go and start decompensating. Dr. Harlan Anderson says, you don't solve problems, you dissolve them. So how do we pick them apart?
I like that.
How do we pick them apart and really just kind of really have this conversation and understand where this word came from? And I love that stuff.
Right. The history of it.
Yeah, well, and I think that also speaks to how much work therapists have to do also.
Right.
You know, where I think that you have to be able to have these tough conversations. That's why so many people come to therapy, because they're not able to have tough, productive conversations outside of the office.
Right.
So it's sort of what you're saying. This is an opportunity.
Right.
How do we have these tough conversations?
This therapy room was ethically and legally designed to have those conversations.
Mm-hmm.
So if you aren't able to do it, we have to go back to that supervision work and be willing to have those conversations. You can set those boundaries and still allow the conversation to happen. Because when that conversation doesn't happen, I guarantee you the clients can feel it.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Because you're going to be shifting. You're going to be the one.
Yeah, the whole air of the room changes.
And it does.
When you're uncomfortable, which is one of the things, like your anxiety needs to be lower than your clients.
Right.
And so if you're anxious and worried and like, then they're going to feel that and it's going to affect them, which kind of feeds into whatever system they have going on.
Right.
When they're dealing with their emotions and things like that.
Completely agree. Yeah.
So without going into too much detail, obviously, because we can't, but if you had to describe it, I want all of us to kind of share your first experience with racism coming into the room, and then how did you handle it? And that's pretty much what your blog is about.
The blog's about it. So, I definitely want to hear people's responses and comments to it. But, just to kind of give a general, and again, obviously can't give you too many details. Right. I was a brand new intern at a psych hospital here locally in Houston. And I had gotten in like late in the morning, and I was working in an outpatient setting. And so it was pretty full all the time. And my therapist, wonderful clinical social worker, and she was real supportive. And she was just like, hey, listen, just want to give you a heads up. There's a racist client here. You don't have to do it if you don't want to. I'm gonna do the family session just to kind of make it safe. And I was like, cool. I didn't think twice about it.
Right.
And it was cool. And I didn't let this out of the blog, but as you know, here in Houston, we have a lot of displaced Louisiana people. We had two nurses there, and I'll never forget Nikki and Carla. And they're like, Rene, if something goes down, I got your back. I got your back. Or something, like that.
Right.
I didn't get to put that in the blog, but
they had you.
Yeah, you can't find more down women than displaced Louisiana nurses. But they, something happened. My supervisor got pulled away for emergency, and this person's spouse had driven a long way to come and be part of the session because they lived in a rural area. And so, it's interesting. I kind of hyped myself up because I was thinking, I'm gonna show him. I'm gonna show them. I'm gonna show them what's going on, and I'm gonna make sure that they know they can't, mess with my people.
Take on all of this on my back.
And I'm passive aggressive anyways. And so I know I'm not aggressive at all. But I get real sarcastic and
the word sarcastic.
Yeah, we're about to go into the room and I'll never forget this person's face. Stoic, like chiseled out of stone. Very impactful eyes, and they just look at me and they say, have you heard about me? And I was like, I was playing like an idiot. Like, no, I haven't. What's going on? Nice to meet you. And they're like, my name is Rene Garcia. I go like that. Making sure I like, I really like, mucho gusto, like something like that.
Just so it's clear.
Yeah. And, without a blink, he goes, the person goes, I just want to question, I don't know if they say anything about me, but I don't know if you heard too much about me, but I have this thing against Hispanic men, and I don't want to say anything that's going to offend you. And that to me was like, I wasn't expecting that, right? Because I was expecting, any
you just start off,
derogatory term, you people, that kind of thing, and that to me was like, oh, this person sounded like they're willing to have that conversation, but they're allowing me a chance to not get out, and that to me, I wasn't expecting that, and so that's what the blog post is about, and we ended up having some really great dialogue, and we ended up becoming kind of pals, and this person kept requesting me for their sessions, and we ended up, building a really good rapport because I was willing to have that conversation.
Right. Yeah.
And really, I keep shouting out to her, Dr. Harleen Anderson. She talks about the guest versus the host, the guest host kind of situation. And really, in the therapy room, I feel like, you're hosting the client there, right?
Yeah.
Right.
But in that moment, I really felt that he was allowing me to be a guest into his world, their world, you know what I'm saying? And so it was very, it threw me off, but we ended up clearing out a lot of stuff. And to me, I think if I was in their position, I don't think I would have fallen far from where they were at, because I think that they were going through some really specific things that were influenced by external cultural influences, by their choice of political, stance. And I think I really ended up, feeling kind of sorry for the person and really kind of glad we had those conversations because they were willing to go there.
Yeah.
They were willing to go there.
Right.
And so again, I can't emphasize that enough. If people are willing to go there, I think you as a therapist have to be willing to go there as well.
Right. Well, and I think that is, Ebony and I were talking, it's what's tougher to talk about, race or sex in the room. And I think it's the same way on any topic that is taboo, and why we have to do our personal work. And the way that you're describing it sounds like you had a really great support system as well, right? The supervision you were receiving, the training you were receiving, to where you were able to have that shift on, yes, I'm human and I have my experiences, but how as a therapist am I still going to fill my role as the therapist and making sure that the client, is the priority here.
Right. And I think with minority therapists too, I mean, every time you look in the mirror, every time y'all get in the mirror to do y'all's hair, I mean, anytime I sign my name, but I ain't gonna say, I'm reminded that, I am from this stance or this point of view. And so I think with the thing with the sex and the race question is, I think sex can be uncomfortable to talk about, but with training, you can really develop those conversations. I think race is tough because it's something that I have no idea what you have been through as a Latina or you have been through as a Black woman in your life. I have no clue what a word of, when someone may use derogatory term to me, it may make me laugh because I'm thinking, well, this guy's an idiot. But to someone else, that could be years of trauma. And big T trauma, little t trauma doesn't matter. Consistent trauma that is built up. And so I do think it has to do with people's core. But when I saw that, and you sent me the questions we're talking about today, sex versus race, to me, those are tough conversations, but the hardest conversations that I've had has been with people's religion and spiritual backgrounds. And those, to me, I think are harder because those are intangible things that people just lock into. And if they're not set in these things, then, if things aren't in line with their spiritual beliefs, then it's really hard to move them. And so I think those conversations are harder than those sex and race questions.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. And I definitely feel like, when it comes to talking about those taboo topics, sometimes the client, and we know as individuals, when you share certain opinions, you might get blowback. Like, I didn't think that way or whatever. And some of those topics are so polarizing that if they feel like every time I brought this up to someone who didn't agree, it's been an issue. It's been an argument. So to be able to talk about it with someone who might still not disagree with me and still might think like, whatever I'm thinking is wrong, but to be able to still have that conversation in a manner that's healthy, in a manner that's why I'm really trying to learn more about you and I'm curious, because that's a big thing, right? Being curious about where this comes from, why do you believe that, which sounds like a big part of what you did in your therapy session, like really understanding where his views came from, and then kind of sympathizing like, oh, well, that does suck. Like that's not a good situation that you found yourself in.
Right, for sure. And it's, and again, I write in the blog, my dad was very much, not too far off age from this person and was having these same fears, completely different professions, but same exact things. And there's some real truth behind the systemic way we treat ageism and how people get older and what jobs are available to them. And so, again, the option to empathize with them was not, once I kind of had to, and again, I'm not perfect. This wasn't something magical that I did, and I'm so like uber therapist. But I had to keep reminding myself throughout that session, this isn't about you, this isn't about you, this is about you. And you have to, and then to process it with your supervisor. I can't believe I did that. I never thought I'd have that conversation. And then it turned out to be really helpful, So, but yeah, for sure.
I definitely feel like with my first experience, it was the same thing. I was I was actually licensed professional counselor, but I was still in MFT training.
Mm-hmm.
So I was doing couples therapy, and it was similar. They made some comments where I was kind of like, ugh, like that doesn't feel okay. But a big part of that was that I hadn't really talked to my supervisor about race before.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Like I just hadn't brought it up. Like I'm in this, supervision with this white lady who I love to death, but this, white lady, and then, there have been other minorities in supervision, but for the most part, it was other white women or men. And so I just hadn't really brought up race at all. And so when it happened and it affected me so much, I had to I had to bring it up and I had to talk about it. And she was amazing. And she was like, so are you going to talk about it with them? Like when they say these things, how do you address it? So she really was on, like, you do have to take that time to really tell them, like, okay, it's kind of like disclosing, just like when you say that this is what happens.
Right.
And so, and I would love to know more about why you think this way about people. And it was like, it wasn't even directly like they weren't like black people, blah, blah, blah. But it was like, well, he has these certain experiences that she hasn't had, and that means he's a bad person. And I'm like, wait, what? And so it was kind of like indirect, but having to have that conversation just based on my supervisor, like it's necessary.
Right.
You have to open up and then allow them the space to continue to talk about it, in a manner that feels comfortable.
Right.
And they stuck with me and loved me to death.
Yeah. I've been lucky to have some really cool supervisors. Adriana Gill Wilkerson, she was another Our Lady of the Lake alumni, and even though she wasn't my supervisor for my licenses, she's always been a really good source to bounce stuff off of. And then my supervisor for my licenses. I think that's really important, and I think sometimes that topic in itself gets overshot in therapy school in our bachelor's programs. The importance of a strong supervisor that's willing to go down these paths and what their history is and things like that, and because that person really does set a standard of how you do clinical practice moving forward. I'm not saying everything's influenced by that, but I do think it's important to spend a lot of time, really researching who your supervisor is.
Absolutely.
Because it's tough, because you need them. You absolutely need them. And some of them are willing to have those conversations, and some may not be. But I do think we get stuck sometimes in how much they cost, if we're getting a good deal.
Right.
I just want to get this done so I can go and, start running my own thing.
And not do the process. And a lot of it is having I know for me, it was a lot of self of the therapist stuff that I would have to process out, with my supervisor. So yeah, it's so important, and I tell that to new therapists all the time. Have a therapist that you can address all of these issues, or not a therapist, a supervisor that you can address all of these issues with. It's so important. Mm-hmm. My experience was really early on into. I think I was still a student at the time, because you can do your practicum. And the client made a very explicit remark about Mexicans. And so sometimes I'm the same way. People don't realize I'm Mexican. Mm-hmm. And so it caught me so off guard, partly because I was still a student. Mm-hmm. And I just remember it really affected me. I was lucky in that my supervisor was amazing, and I was able to process it with my supervisor at the time, and the cohort that I was in, they were able to see me right afterwards and really see how it affected me and one of my other colleagues. And so they processed it with me also, but I remember I've had, some of the people from my cohort go back who aren't, minorities, and they'll say that incident really impacted me and really gave me sort of like this inside view to what clinicians of color go through, so in all, it was a good experience that I had it early on, even though it was early on, and so early on you have all kinds of insecurities.
Right. Already outside of that. Yeah.
So it's like, boom, welcome to therapy. We're like, oh.
Right, for sure. And also think too, people of your same race or even same group, Latinos come in different all sorts of
all kinds of shades and flavors and colors.
right, for sure. And so I do think it's also too, be willing to have those conversations within those racial boundaries of saying, this may not be offensive to you, but this was crazy offensive to me.
Right.
I think that's sometimes we need to do a little bit more work in those in our interracial relationships.
That's true, because like you said earlier, that's something that somebody might say to you that's not so offensive, or you don't take it that way, but then somebody else can just be completely taken aback and
Right.
bothered by it. And I think that goes into even like the microaggressions, right?
Yes.
So if a client or even a coworker or whatever makes a comment,
Right.
how do your other coworkers, your supervisor, whoever, how do they support you, or do they even acknowledge it?
Right.
Like if somebody told me like, oh, you came with your hair looking like that today, like how are the people around me going to support me?
Mhm.
And will they? Are they like, oh, it's not that big of a deal, like just let it go?
Right.
Or,
Right.
you know, maybe you should do this to your hair or whatever the case may
Mhm.
be. Like, so I do feel like
Mhm.
that's, I wonder, I haven't had too many experiences because thank goodness I haven't had a lot of work in agency.
Mhm.
But one thing that one of my friends, a therapist friend, said that a lot of times when you work, like I worked in a mental hospital for a while, and they were like, they are going to point out whatever insecurity you have.
Mm.
If you are insecure because your ears are big, they are going to say it.
Oh man.
If you are insecure because your butt, whatever the case may be, like it's like working with kids, like they don't have a filter, and especially because they have all these emotions and all their things going on, and so you really do have to, like in that situation, it's kind of like I can't necessarily be like, don't talk to me like that, because you know when you're in a mental hospital, depending on how far the psychosis is, you know, it's not really a logical conversation that can be had, but those things still can affect you when somebody is saying those things to you. So
For sure, yeah. I think it's symptomology. You know, like
Mhm.
where is this coming from?
right.
And I do agree with that statement. You know, a lot of the times, whenever I encounter it's funny, microaggressions. I feel like I've been dealing with that my whole life. Am I going about microaggressions because I look physically the way I look?
Mm-hmm.
But I do think, you know, to me in the therapy room, I'm thinking, okay, this is being used to block something,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
This is being used this is serving some utility
Right.
for them to use this phrase or statement. And you're right. I mean, I remember they'd pick up everything you say, hey, you did that wrong, or hey, like that, you know,
Yeah.
like, oh, well, I didn't know y'all can be therapists, and things like that, to be direct like that, or
right.
indirect. And I think those microaggressions are really tough to, you know, to kind of, those to me, I feel, are harder to work with than the direct
Definitely.
racism. Because at least with direct
Definitely.
racism, you're just like, cool, okay.
Got it. This is how you think.
You don't like me.
I do agree. Microaggressions like, okay, I felt that, but I don't know
Right.
if that's what you meant or
Yeah.
when you say, yeah, I agree 100%.
I remember a friend early on in junior high, good friend. We're in band together,
Mhm.
real cool guy. Not a guy I grew up with. I've always had different random groups of friends, but a white guy. And I remember him telling me, you know what, man, you're pretty much the coolest Mexican I know.
Yeah.
And in my head, I didn't know how to
Right.
because a side of me loved him as a friend. He's a
Right.
great guy.
Yeah.
But then another side of me was like, I don't know what that is.
What does
Are you
that
saying? What about the other? Because I got some
Right.
other Mexican.
Right,
They're kind of
right.
cool. You know, you
Well,
should,
lots of cool Mexicans.
yeah, this guy.
Well, I think that's what I was going to say, is to highlight what microaggressions are for people who don't understand what they are. And I think they are those statements that will leave you like, wait, you know?
Yeah.
I remember one of my earliest memories also was, again, friends in middle school, and I remember that they would comment, you know, oh, these Julios are driving. I'm like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
You know? And it's like, well, you're not like those
Mhm.
Mexicans.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
What are those Mexicans probably like my uncles or something.
Right. Right.
Right.
You know?
So that separation of like, you're different
Right.
than the rest of them.
Right.
But yeah, it can be, microaggression is hard to explain because like you said, it's not overt. Like it's not like clear, duh, that was offensive. It's those little statements that make you have to think like, well, was that supposed to be? Or
Right.
what are they trying to say? Where you feel kind of confused about what the intent was in that statement.
Right.
And then you can be accused of being too sensitive.
Too sensitive. Yeah.
Oh, you're so sensitive. Why do you got to make everything about race?
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah.
I've shared. One time I was at a educational workshop. I'm in the elevator. I'm dressed like this, and a white woman is in there, and I get in, and she says, she asked me, "What time do y'all come by to clean the rooms?"
Mhm.
I'm like, I'm not with the housekeeping department.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm at the
Yeah.
same conference room.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And so it's often you're caught off guard.
Right.
You're like, wow, and they'll say something in a way where they may or they may not really think they're being offensive.
It's an innocent mistake.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, okay, well, it was just a mistake. And so you're kind of left to do I educate you on this? Do I want to educate?
Yeah.
Do I look at you like, what's wrong with you? You know, so
Yeah.
it gets trickier against, like we're talking about, when you're in the therapy room or you're working with colleagues, or if it's your supervisor.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think once that trust is built, you can really, it can turn to say, hey, you know, I know we talked about this, but maybe before we leave, can we talk about this? Because when you brought this up, you know, to me, that has been something that has been hurtful. I've heard these things before. And then chances are these people have never had that conversation before with a person that they are trusted and within these walls and these confines. And so I don't think, it's weird. Like, we can't make it about those things, but I also don't think it's wrong to include those in those conversations. Because again, they're bringing it up for a reason. That's why I think, you know, everything, you know, I'll always remember this phrase from school is even when they're saying nothing, they're saying something, you know, and so every word has purpose. Language is generative. All these things matter. And so how can we now be able to show them that we are a therapist that can have those conversations and be willing to go down that path with them?
Right. What do you do when it's a colleague and they're making the statements and they have had those conversations?
Right.
You know, like you're saying, hey, someone may have never had this conversation with them, but let's say they've had the conversation with others, and you're still sort of finding yourself on the other end of some of these microaggressions and some real aggressive.
Yeah, you know, yeah, no, for sure. I think with business and stuff, I think it's a completely different issue. Right. I think if you're working with a colleague, I think you have to get somebody involved, and if they're unwilling to, and things remain, you know, aggressive like that, then that's a hostile work environment, and you need to get people involved. That's why, unfortunately, we're not a right to work state, but I mean, you know, we don't have the best labor laws here, but that doesn't mean that you can't involve someone above you. And I think you have to, because ultimately this work is different from the therapy room. You know, colleagues are different, completely different. The colleagues aren't coming to you for therapy. They're there to work side by side with you, and we have these laws in places to protect these things. And if you do feel offended, you have to go involve somebody. You have to. And I don't think the whole squeaky wheel gets the grease thing. I mean, you know, I think some people are fearful that, well, I don't get put on people's radars. Listen, I've worked in environments that have been non-supportive. As a therapist, you know, as a therapist, you know,
that's what I'm talking about, the therapy word.
As a therapist, you would think like, oh, we all love each other, and we all have flowy skirts and infinity scars, you know, like that's not the you know, it's not the case. There's some real people that, you know, that get into mental health because they don't want to do their own work, you know.
We were just talking about this. Yes,
so,
people get into positions for different reasons.
And therapists are human, so just you're gonna have all different types, and everybody hasn't, like y'all kind of said, haven't done the work, and so or just don't feel like it's a problem, right? So that's why they might get a client and try to like revert them to their thinking or whatever the case may be, and it's scary because obviously sometimes those clients don't have that voice to speak up for themselves, which is why they're coming to therapy.
Oh, for sure. You know, ego is not hard to build in the therapy world. You can have 10 terrible sessions. But the 11th one, you have a breakthrough and you feel good and you're like, hey,
I'm good.
Hey, get a Dr. Phil. Have me on.
Somebody needs to be
I need my own show right now. So I think it's very easy to build ego because you can see success right in front of you, and that ego is really hard to build as you get later on in your career. And so I do think, when it comes to the business side, you have to be able to have someone you trust to reach out to, and don't hesitate to reach out to the HR, anybody, if you're working in an agency. I think, if y'all are sharing an office, y'all start beefing. I think y'all need to really, hey, let's turn the cameras off and let's just get face to face and have a conversation.
Let's turn the cameras off and meet me outside.
That's exactly.
Absolutely.
Well, I think what all of this really, for me, is the importance of having a support network. Be that with your supervisor, and even when you're fully licensed, don't hesitate to go back if you need to and reach out to your old supervisor, or having colleagues that are in the field, and then just having your own therapist sometimes. I tell you, I'm like, this is why therapists need therapy too. And I think the big takeaway for me is we as therapists have to really have our own self-care support network and be doing our ongoing work, because we are human.
Right.
We
Right.
are human, and if we want to keep all of that in check, we have to do our work, and it has to be ongoing work.
Right.
Yeah.
Completely agree. Completely agree.
So I feel like we've talked a lot about it from the therapist perspective, but what about a client who has a non-minority therapist that just doesn't seem to get it? And I say that because it's easy to say like, oh, you have to find a therapist that's a good fit, but sometimes those people just may not be around.
Right.
And so how do you, if you feel like you're going into the therapy office and some things are happening that's making you uncomfortable, how do we give them that voice to like kind of speak up and still get the treatment that they need?
Yeah.
For sure. Well, again, reminding them this is their session.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you're paying money for it, or some agency is paying money for it, and you know,
And even if you're not,
I think ultimately, if you are unable to be, even I don't want to give 100% because that's an absolute, but if you're unable to be as open as you feel that you could be to get work done, I think you have to really analyze what is this relationship like and how can I change it. And I think as clients, I mean, you aren't given those skills as we are as therapists. Right. I think for one, therapists need to be in tune with their clients to be able to pick up on this. But if they're not, I think as the clients, I wouldn't hesitate to bring it up. You know, I'm a big supporter in saying, you know, therapists are like hairstylists. You have to go to one until you find a good one.
Right.
But I agree with that statement. Sometimes that may not always be the chance. That won't always be an option. So it's your space. You get to use it how you want. Urge to say, okay, how can we stop this and talk about it?
Right.
Because I don't feel I can be 100% with you because you said this comment.
Yeah.
And chances are, again, if that person is not from that same race, they may be a minority and not from that same race. I made a statement to a friend of mine because there's an Asian area of town that in Dallas that I love going to because I love ramen. I love anything Asian food. I'll eat all day. And my friend's from Taiwan, and I said, there's like a little Chinatown up close by us, you know, to get some food. And he goes, hey man, could you, I don't think we want to call it Chinatown. And I just had never thought about it because we call Chinatown here in Houston, the west side of town, but that's not what that area is town. And it offended him. And so again, it took him saying, hey, this is not cool because I had no clue. And so you have to be willing to, as a client, to say, hey, this is not cool with me, and just see what their response is. Chances are they may not know, and really strong therapists will sit here and say, you know what, let's talk about it. Let's have a dialogue about it.
Right.
The ones who can't have that conversation will let you know immediately.
Exactly.
And then you as a client, as a consumer, get to have the option if you will choose to return or not.
Right. Right. And I think that's a good point because just because they're not strong in that area does not mean they're not a strong therapist.
Correct.
And so strong therapists are able to take those uncomfortable situations and really make it kind of work and work within it. Like, I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to be open. We're going to talk about it so that I can be aware to not, and I do understand that frustration of like, I shouldn't have to educate you about therapy session. But if we take 2 minutes to really, like, for me to understand and say, okay, I got it. I'll make sure that I don't do that anymore. And then we can move on. That can be helpful for you and for the next person that comes to see that therapist.
I agree.
And for the clients that they are not able to bring up those topics, and that might be why they're coming to therapy, because they struggle to really have a voice or to say something. I think, if anything, just remembering, sometimes we talk about it all the time, it may not be a good fit. It may not be a good fit. And it may not be maybe at the point where you're at right now where you're trying to work on having a voice. It's not a good fit because I'm going to have to, you know, at some point, yes, you will have to be challenged, but it's what you're saying is to feel safe enough to go there. And so I think the real takeaway is just knowing if something feels off, if it doesn't feel like it's a good connection, don't give up on therapy. And I think that's a piece, is that don't give up on therapy. it may just be this therapist, and it is sometimes hard. There are limited resources, there are limited options.
Mhm.
You know, I have this filter because I live in Houston, and it's like, I got a whole bunch of choices.
Yeah.
But there are areas where people don't have as many choices. Don't give up on therapy. Ask around. Hopefully, information like this helps you to understand. I love what you said. You are a consumer.
Yeah.
So you have the ability to make other choices, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Just don't, you know, if I go somewhere and I love Mexican food, I don't give up on Mexican food because I went to a bad restaurant. You know,
Right.
like these fajitas don't taste good, right? So I'm just not going to go to that restaurant for my Mexican food. I'm going to try and find another one.
Right. And then there also is the other side of, if you have 1 to 5, 6, 7 therapists and you're still struggling, it might be something that's more intense.
That's another thing. Yes,
Right.
that's just keeping it real.
Yeah.
Like if there's no therapist,
Nobody will ever be able to help you or do.
Right.
Yeah.
Are you ready for therapy?
Mhm.
Are you ready
Yeah.
to be a little challenged? Because that's why you come into therapy.
Yeah, there's a difference between they're not saying what I want them to say
Exactly.
versus
Right.
you know
What I need to hear.
I don't feel that I can say what I want to
Yes,
say.
right,
That,
yes,
you know, and
yes.
I think you have to be willing to have that
Yeah,
honest
it's-
conversation
yeah,
with yourself.
yeah.
too.
100%.
So many factors.
Definitely. All right, so let's go to Rene. So tell us about your practice, what you're up to, your chubby podcast.
Yeah.
Chubby therapist.
Chubby therapist.
I had a friend say, "Hey man, how's chubby talk?"
How's
I'm like,
chubby talk?
How's chubby talk?
That's a whole other topic.
It's a chubby therapy chubby therapy podcast, a show dedicated to making mental health not scary. It's a show I started a while ago. It's a one-person show that I need to put more time into, but there's a number of episodes on iTunes and Stitcher. Go check me out. And then I also have a private practice in the southwest area of Plano, far north Dallas area, Garcia Mental Health. I'm really close to the Dallas North Tollway. Garcia Mental Health. Located real close to the Dallas North Tollway and the George Bush Turnpike. So
Okay.
you can reach me at garciamentalhealth.com and chubbytherapypod.com.
Yes.
Yes.
And he is one of our dope therapists. He is on the site.
Yes,
Hey.
you can find him there.
I got confronted.
I was gonna say we're not gonna talk about how he got on the site, but he's on the
He's
site.
the light-skinned Mexican on the
But you did make it to the
Yeah,
site.
he was like, why you on the site?
I know. I got confronted, but I'm on it now.
You're on it. So as far as like therapy, mental health, either for clients or just for other therapists, what is one of your favorite like resources or books that you use?
So I have 2 books. I have one is they're both pretty well known, but that does mean a lot to me. One of them is Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. I love how he talks about love and sex and just kind of the logotherapy side of it. It's a really good resource for clinicians, and I just find the story really inspiring. And then the other one is the 4 Agreements.
Oh, yeah.
I love that
the
one.
4
Yeah.
Agreements.
You know, I think, you know, I've had my own battles with religion and just kind of where I stand in the spiritual stance. But I really like the 4 Agreements because it just puts things very, I don't know, it just is a really great way of living, and it's really meant a lot to me. So I think if you're looking for easy reads and things to kind of help you out, those are 2 really good
Awesome.
resources. So
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to check the first one out.
Yeah, I've heard of it, but I've never read it. So now,
It's pretty intense. It's
Okay.
it's about a guy who survived the Holocaust and just how he saw people just give up, and you know, and just kind of his own story and how he now developed logotherapy. It's just really great. I encourage you to read it. I read it in grad school, and it's been just one of my favorite books.
Awesome.
What makes you a dope therapist?
What makes me a dope therapist?
Yes.
I have I think I have a natural openness and humor and positivity to me that makes people really comfortable.
Mhm.
That's what I've always been told, and so I've kind of embraced it and just said, you know, I'm just make it a part of me. I like to joke around. I like to use humor as a tool, but I also like to be willing to go places where I think some people aren't willing to go. You know, I talked about this on my last show. You know, to me, the best, I don't want to be known as the best therapist. I want to be known as a therapist that does things different. And I hear a lot of that times from people that have gone to therapy from other places and come to me is that, you know what, this session felt different and I really liked it. And that to me is what I want to hear.
Right.
And so, you know, I spend a lot of time joining. I spend a lot of time getting to know them. And to my fault, I've been criticized about it, but that's neither here nor there. But again, it's all about trust, and you have to be willing to empathize. You have to be willing to put yourself in their shoes, and I think I spent a lot of time doing that.
That's
dope.
awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I think just from the few conversations that we have had with other therapists on the show, one of the biggest things is just the comfort with yourself.
Yeah.
And being able to be genuine in who you are and
Yeah.
bringing that into the therapy room.
Right.
I think sometimes we have these ideas of what a therapist is, what a therapist looks like, and once you get to the space of like, I'm me, and I chose therapy, or therapy chose me for a reason, so let that shine, as opposed to trying to be what other people are when it comes to therapy.
I didn't choose the therapy life.
Yeah.
The therapy life chose me. Yeah.
Right.
That is
right.
what it is.
I didn't want these skills.
I know, right?
I didn't want them.
I didn't look for these skills. They
Yeah.
just here.
Yeah.
Anyway. All right, and then why is therapy dope?
Therapy is dope because you get to have the conversations that I don't think you've ever gotten to have before,
Mm-hmm.
and with a person that is paid to have to listen to you. So I think therapy to me is growth, and it's a dance, and it's not quick, but the not quick stuff means it lasts longer. So that's
Yes,
why I
say it
love therapy.
again. Say it again. Yes.
Take
yes.
your time. That's when change really happens. You can't have change happen like that.
I know.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So where do we find you?
Where do we-
And
GarciaMentalHealth.com. You can reach my private practice at 214-308-1122. Chubby Therapy Pod. Check me out on iTunes. And then,
What about social media?
Social media, I'm on Facebook, and I'm on Instagram as well. I'll give you links because I don't remember them.
It's Chubby Therapy Pod.
Yeah, add Chubby Therapy Pod.
Put it in the description.
Yeah,
I tagged you this morning.
I'm not a good businessman.
He's like, I don't know.
Don't say that. Don't say that. I am in the
I am
process.
growing
I'm
as
in
a
the process.
businessman.
I'm in
Yes.
the process. I like
Yes.
James' call. I'm not a businessman. I'm a business
I'm
Man.
a businessman. Yes. Yes.
Thank you guys for
Thank you.
checking out Between Sessions. Yeah, Between Sessions podcast. Make sure you go to melaninandmentalhealth.com. Check out the directory. If you are a clinician, join the directory. We are still doing it 3 months free. This is a limited time thing, so please join while we're doing it. Enjoy the benefits. Get these clients that are looking for you. We keep getting more and more people visiting the site every day. It's funny because I get to see like which therapists get views and stuff like that. So
And there's still like the ones that have states or cities where nobody's listed on there. They are contacting us and they are asking, do you know somebody here? So people are going to the site. People are finding out about melaninandmentalhealth.com, and they are going, and then when they don't find you there, they're like, what's up? Where they at?
Right. So check it out. Follow us across social media at Melanin and Mental Health, Melanin Health on Twitter, and listen to Between Sessions. Oh, leave iTunes reviews. That really helps us out to get the word out about Between Sessions podcast. Let us know what you like and what you would like to see more of. And I think that's it.
Thank you, Renee, for
Thank
helping
you
us
so
change the
much.
face of therapy.
Yes, awesome. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.